My name's Tami Simon. I'm the founder of Sounds True, and it is a real joy and honor to be with you to host this session. And in just a moment, I'm going to turn it over now to Jon Kabat-Zinn, and he'll greet all of us, welcome us, and we'll begin with a meditation. Jon?
Well, thank you, Tami, and hello to all of you around the world. Most of you, of course, are coming to this kind of practice perhaps for the first time, having heard about it in one way or another. And I'm very, very interested, although we can't have a dialogue in a sense because I cannot see you and the questions even won't be in real time. So working within those constraints, I really want to say right from the beginning that that I can feel you because of your motivation for signing up for this program in the first place. And although we may be and are, in fact, around the world, that we have one intention in cultivating mindfulness, and that is, I'm guessing, the intention to live our life as if it really, really, really mattered and not on autopilot, blasting through our moments to try to get to some peak moments or peak experiences at some other time. And this can be, in some sense, the kiss of death, because you can go through decades of your life and actually not be in touch with what's deepest and best and most vivid in your life in the only moment that any of us ever have in order to experience anything. And so before we go any further, why don't we simply clear the decks of all your written material and note-taking and everything else. My suggestion is not to take notes during at least the guided meditation, but to actually be part of the process. I'm actually guiding it for you. And the whole thing is going to be filmed and will be available at some future time. So you don't need the text of this. And what I'm trying to do in a certain way is bring to life the first 3 weeks of the course, which are only based on, text and then on audio and video. And this is live. It's live, of course, over the internet and live in terms of the technology, but in a very real way, the technology just allows us to tune into how connected we are to the world and to life simply by being human and being alive at this particular moment in time. So let's establish ourselves in a posture, whatever makes the most sense for you, that embodies wakefulness and dignity, even if it's the middle of the night your time. But establishing yourself in a sitting posture, or if you want to, lying on the floor or standing, or for that matter, standing on your head. But I'm going to assume for the most part that we're going to be sitting for this, either on a chair or on a meditation cushion, on zafu and zabuton, if you know that terminology, on the floor. And you can work either with your eyes open or your eyes closed. I will be on the screen, of course, as will Tami, the entire time. But there's no need to actually see me. At a certain point, you might want to close your eyes. On the other hand, meditating with your eyes open is extremely important, because if you could only be mindful with your eyes closed, it would be of very, very little use. So whether your eyes are open or your eyes are closed, let's actually come in touch with a sense of the body as a whole. Sitting here, gazing at the screen if you like, or with the eyes closed in front of the screen, and experiencing the body as a whole sitting here, and of course, breathing. And breathing is going on all the time, but excuse me. Breathing is going on all the time, but as you well know, a lot of the time we're so distracted that we're really out of touch with the body altogether, and with this very simple but vital movement of air in and out of the body. So bringing attention to it and cultivating awareness around it can actually ground us in the present moment that only moment that we ever have to learn or grow or feel or do anything. And so the invitation is to take up residency here in awareness and settle into the moment-to-moment riding on the waves of your own breathing as you sit here, experiencing the full dimensionality of sensation as the breath comes into your body, and the full dimensionality of sensations as the breath leaves your body. And just to be clear, for those of you who are pretty new to the practice, maybe only 3 weeks into it, this is not about pushing or pulling your breath or manipulating it in any way, but simply experiencing one aspect of life unfolding in this here and now. And the body really knows how to breathe, and it doesn't need you to improve on it. Your assignment is to simply feel, not think about, but feel all of the sensations associated with this breath coming into the body, and all of the sensations associated with this breath leaving the body. And then, if you will, surfing or riding on the waves of your own breathing, perhaps deep in the belly, perhaps in the chest or at the nostrils or wherever the breath sensations are most vivid for you. And taking up residency here in awareness of your own rhythmic breathing. And just to say right off the bat and this will be very important and helpful for the ongoing unfolding of this course, that although the breath sensations are what we would call the immediate object of our attention, it's never about the object of attention. The meditation that's always secondary in the meditation practice, the object of attention, whatever it is. And it could be breath sensations, or it could be the body as a whole, or it could be thoughts or sounds or any aspect of human experience, emotions, interpersonal kinds of stuff. The key thing is your awareness. So it's not about the object of attention, it's about the attending itself. And hopefully that translates into your language if you're not a native English speaker. But the attending actually describes a core aspect, a core capacity of our being human, which never really gets much attention, but is probably, when you boil it right down, the single most important element of our being human, and that is our capacity for awareness. So we're talking about awareness of the breath sensations. And we could be talking about awareness of sounds or awareness of the field of sensation in the whole body, or awareness of thoughts, as I said. So it's always about the awareness, never about the objects of attention, but the objects of attention can be incredibly valuable and instrumental in keeping you grounded in the practice and anchored to awareness, to the point where that's where you wind up living. You wind up taking up residency in your own awareness. Only it's not exactly fair to call it your own, because you didn't make it, and you have, a very unusual relationship to it. But if you can cultivate greater intimacy with your awareness, all good things follow from that, in terms of the multiple intelligences that we as humans are or have coming online in ways that can really serve not only your own health and well-being, but your roles in family and work, and your contribution to the planet, to the world, which is in sorry need of greater mindfulness and heartfulness and compassion. So as I'm talking, what I'm basically inviting you to do is not tune out what I'm saying and think, well, we'd be having a great meditation if Jon weren't talking so much, but actually invite you to drop underneath my words, where there's only silence, even if I'm talking, and silence in between the words, just like there's silence in between sounds. And just like we'll see later on, there's silence in between even your thoughts. So we're cultivating intimacy with this silence, but the silence is synonymous with wakefulness, with awareness, right here and right now. So let's drop in and sustain our awareness in silence over time. Or if you get caught up in the mind and distracted, as of course you certainly will, then you can keep coming back to the belly, to your breathing, to the breath sensations, and take up residency again in your own awareness at this particular moment in our course, unfolding in a way that features this object of attention, the breath, to help stabilize us in the awareness. And just to say, if the mind wanders, which of course it will, over and over again, and you get seriously distracted and destabilized and carried away, lost in thought, or even having emotions of one kind or another come up, whether it be anxiety or sadness or fear or anything else, just know that's part of the curriculum, totally normal. And when you discover that, when you become aware that your mind is no longer in touch with the breath sensations in the body, you're already back. And so you don't want to beat yourself up or push away anything that arises in your mind, or condemn yourself, or pursue anything. The breath is always here. Your awareness is really always here. It just gets kind of clouded over and obscured. So every time you realize that, here we are again. And guess what? It's the present moment all over again, no matter what time zone you happen to be in at this moment, whether you're tuning in live or whether you're going to tune in later. And here we are dropping. The silence is always here. The wakefulness is always here, if you're willing to remember and align yourself with it. In this case, whether I'm talking or not. Now, if you're relatively if you're relatively new to the meditation practice, you may have found yourself during these past 3 weeks or right in this moment wondering whether you're doing it right or whether what you're feeling is what you're supposed to be feeling, uh, and actually trying to feel something that maybe you've read about or you think it would be good to feel, especially if you have challenges with emotions or thoughts of one kind or another so that they're driving you crazy. So it's very important to affirm from the very beginning that mindfulness as a form of meditation and as a way of being and living your life is not trying to get anywhere else to some better special state where everything will be terrific and you won't have any stress and you won't have any thoughts and you won't have any worries. Quite the contrary. Mindfulness is not about getting anywhere else to some special state. It's about recognizing that the state that you're in right now is itself incredibly special, whether it's pleasant or not, if you're able to embrace it in your own awareness. After all, no matter what you may think is wrong with you, as we say to our patients, medical patients in the stress reduction clinic, there's far more right with you than wrong with you, no matter what's wrong with you. And what this practice does is, in some sense, undergird and pour energy into what's right with you and see what happens over a period of 8 weeks or 8 years or 80 years. Because this practice really is for life in every way you might understand that phrase. Because it is nothing other than your life, but lived in an embodied way in awareness, as opposed to on automatic pilot zoning through your moments to get the better moments at some time, and then just falling into your grave at the end of it all and realizing just before you die, as Thoreau said very, very clearly in his great treatise Walden, that you hadn't lived. And we're all at risk of doing that, like getting the wrong message about what meditation is, that it's about putting you in some special state. There's no place to go, nothing to do, and nothing to attain, as it says in the Prajnaparamita, wisdom of the Heart Sutra in Mahayana Buddhist practice. There is no place to go, nothing to do, and nothing to attain. And if you start out this way in your meditation practice, you're going to be in a much, much better position to actually cultivate true wisdom and true heartfulness and compassion and clarity and equanimity in your life, because they're all already here. It's not like you have to get them or acquire anything. Really, what we're learning how to do is get out of our own way and drop out, so to speak, from under all these incredible habits of mind that actually imprison us, as Einstein, the quote that you have from Albert Einstein is saying, that we are, in some sense, in our unawareness, in our automatic pilot kind of zoning through our moments to get to better moments, in some sense, our worst enemy. And we undermine our deepest capacities for learning, growing, healing, and transformation. Literally, it could be across the lifespan, and you don't want to do that. So when you take your seat, as we're doing now, it's as if you're stepping out of time altogether into the present moment and being the fullness of who you already are, not trying to make yourself more whole than you are, because you can't possibly do that, because you're already whole, already complete. And that would be true even if you were missing an arm and a leg or anything else. And no matter how much pain and grief you may have experienced, still, as long as the breath is moving in and out of your body, there is more right with you than wrong with you. Healing, profound healing is possible. And then living your way into the fullness of what life has to offer while we have the chance. So simply the deepest invitation is that you rest here in your own awareness, that you become, in some sense, embraced by your own awareness with things exactly as they are. Whether they're pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, whether you like or dislike, want or don't want, fear or long for anything. You're just cultivating a certain kind of okayness right now with things as they are. And then whatever arises in your life then becomes the curriculum of the meditation practice. And believe me, sooner or later, things will arise that you do not want to have happen. And when you've been cultivating mindfulness in this way, it doesn't mean you won't feel pain. It doesn't mean you won't suffer, but it means that you'll have a whole other way of being in wise relationship with the actuality of things. The good, the bad, and the ugly, what I call the full catastrophe, after Zorba the Greek, the full catastrophe of the human condition, and be able to make use of it in ways that are good for you, good for your family, good for your work environment, and good for the world. So it's a fairly big invitation, but it starts right here with the body sitting and breathing and your willingness to take up residency in your own awareness. And sometimes that awareness manifests as silence, silent presence, simply being. Simply breathing and knowing that you're breathing, the knowing of awareness, not thinking. The feeling of the sensations in the belly, in the body. The bringing the mind back every time you notice that it's wandered off, but not before you notice what's on your mind, because that way you cultivate intimacy with your habits of mind, which often wind up becoming seriously imprisoning. And just to say, the cardinal principle, or when you boil it all down, is to not take personally things that are not personal. And when you start to cultivate mindfulness, you see how much we actually, through naming things and through attachment to particular kinds of ideas, usually seriously unexamined, we wind up becoming prisoners of our own thought forms. For instance, maybe you have the idea right now that you're breathing. Of course, that's totally normal from a kind of conventional perspective that you're breathing. And of course, there is breathing going on, certainly. But whoever you think you are, or you think you are when I use the word you, or when you use the word me, frankly, that you is not allowed anywhere near the brainstem and the phrenic nerve and the diaphragm that keeps your body breathing, because you're not reliable enough. You get distracted, get a text, want to, sort of respond to an email, get distracted one way or another. And, if it was you that was doing the breathing, you would have died a long time ago. So there are sort of multiple levels of biological intelligence that actually keep us going. And it's a fiction to say that you're doing it. It's your breathing. And the same with you thinking you're meditating. Whoever you think you are, you're probably not meditating. But who you really are, in some sense, can't not meditate, because who you really are is more akin to pure awareness than anything else. Certainly not the history of what you've done. And that's a narrative. And you can tell that narrative 1,000 different ways. So who are you really? What is your truest nature? And you don't have to answer that. Just rest in awareness and feel, see, breathe, rest, open, sit, love. Just like this. No place to go, nothing to do, and no special something to attain. This is it. Just this. Just this. And with north of 3,000 of us doing this all at the same time around the world, day and night and everything in between, there's an extraordinary way in which we're all part of this same intentionality, this same big mind, this same being human. And each of us, in some sense, is hoping, I guess, to find our own way into this practice and into our lives that optimize well-being, and that our own way that optimizes well-being and that minimizes feelings of harm and being overwhelmed and out of control and lost. And that's the beauty of this practice, that it's up to the task of meeting the human condition as it is in its fullness, and helping us navigate that in ways that are profoundly healthy and satisfying. And some of your questions were actually about how to practice, and what happens when you get anxious or when you contract, or the most important thing is to actually listen deeply to the meditation practice as it's unfolding. And a lot of the answers to your questions you're going to find are lying right next to where the questions are coming from in your own heart or your own mind. So that in that sense, you are the author of both the meditation practice and your life, and you are trustworthy in that regard if you learn to cultivate this kind of deep listening and a deep sensing into the fullness of your body, your heart, your mind, your love. And I want to say right off the bat, and you can instantiate it or try to bring it to your meditation practice from here on out in this course, that when I take my seat, and I try to do it and have been doing it for well over almost 55 years in the morning, because I think it has a profound influence on the unfolding of the rest of the day if you practice your formal meditation practice early in the morning, and even wake up early to make that happen. That there's a certain way in which I've come to experience this taking of my seat as a radical act. It's not just, one more thing I'm going to squeeze into my calendar or the day. I got to meditate and then everything else is going to go better. Life itself is the meditation practice. And so when you take your seat in the morning, I would like to invite you to reflect on whether it's not a radical act of sanity just to stop for a moment and drop into being before you just kind of go off for the day and do all day long. And actually that it's more than a radical act of sanity. It's actually a radical act and expression of love of life, love of the present moment, which is our only moment, love of your own multidimensional repertoire of capacities, including the senses, like, that your eyes see. How much do you actually recognize that it's a gift? A lot of people can't see. Your eyes work, your ears work, your nose works, your tongue works, your mind works. There are far more than 5 senses: proprioception and interoception. We can speak usually. We can, we have all sorts of genius. And we don't know how we do any of it. We certainly don't know what awareness is, even from a neuroscience point of view. And yet the constellation of, unimaginable trillions of atoms and molecules that go into the constellation of your one body, and then the billions of neurons, 86 billion at last count of neurons sitting right underneath your cranium, and at least that many other glial cells in there that nobody really knows what they're doing, and hundreds, if not tens of thousands of trillions of synaptic connections, many of which are changing depending on whether you're meditating or not, or whether you're exercising or not, or what you eat. This is the whole field of neuroplasticity that, you are a total universe. There are more atoms in your body than there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy or any other galaxy. And so when you begin to actually recognize that it's almost incontestable that you're a miraculous being, and everybody else is too, then that gives you a sense of how to be in wise relationship with the life that we have while we have it, to actually live our lives as if they really mattered. And I just want to underscore that that's a love affair, not some kind of narcissistic preoccupation, but a real love affair with the actuality of things and what might be possible if you were to align yourself with what's deepest and best and most profound in your being. So maybe you think that we've stopped meditating and I'm just giving some long rant or speech, but actually the meditation practice has no beginning or no end. Awareness is seamless, just the way there's no, periphery to the known universe. It's boundless, and there's no center to the universe either. It's the same with awareness. There's no center to your awareness, and try to find an edge to it. I don't think you'll find it. So resting here for the remaining of this, the brief few more moments of the meditation practice, and just settling into dropping underneath everything that's been said, and just being in your body, riding the waves of your breath, and taking up residency in full awareness, as if your life depended on it, which it does in more ways than you think, and in more ways than you can possibly think. Because thinking, while it's fantastic and a wonderful form of intelligence, is not all that it's cracked up to be. And usually we drive ourselves crazy with all of our thoughts. And then there are all these other forms of human intelligence that don't get enough airtime. So we can start to exercise these muscles, and it all comes through mindfulness, through awareness, through living your life moment by moment by moment as if it really mattered, right here, right now. And then life itself becomes the meditation practice, not sitting on your butt. Although sitting on your butt is absolutely critical to this, but that you can be sitting lying down, you can be sitting standing, you can be sitting running. I mean, the real practice that we call sitting is just wakefulness. And I'll just say that often if we were sitting in a classroom together, and I didn't do it, but I have these bells here, which I'm not going to ring, but often I'll start a meditation by ringing bells. And you've heard them on some of the guided meditations that are out there. But I'm not going to ring the bells to end the meditation because I want you to, in some sense, excuse me, really realize that there is no end to the meditation practice. There is no end to the meditation practice, nor is there any real beginning to the meditation, because life itself is the meditation practice. And in a very real way, although I've said a lot during this period of time, if you got what I was pointing to in terms of the silence underneath speech and in between the words, and the stillness that's never not here, then in a very real way, I haven't said a word. So let's slowly come back to just feeling the breath rising and falling in the body for a moment or two. Letting go of everything that's been said and that's been heard. And if your eyes have been closed for periods of time, if you might invite yourself to open them now. And to continue with our conversation, keeping in mind that your listening is mindfulness, my speaking is mindfulness, taking notes would be all within the domain of mindfulness. As long as you cultivate and maintain this kind of intimacy with the present moment. Doesn't matter what's going on inside the present moment. Whatever arises, as I said, becomes the real curriculum of the meditation practice and life itself, because they're not two. They're not separate. So, if you want to stretch and just kind of do whatever you like to kind of transition, if you will, from that sense of the formal meditation practice. I, could say a lot more, but I wove a lot of what I felt like was most important to say into the actual guidance of the meditation practice. In part because I think we listen better when we're just really in touch with the present moment and not so much in thinking mode and taking notes and stuff like that. So I sometimes make a distinction between taking notes and taking note. So what mindfulness is, you could say, is just noting whatever it is that arises, lingers, and passes away. And then, as I said earlier, noticing how personally you take it, but realizing it's almost never really about you personally. And especially about the small sense of who you think you are, because one basic message I might as well say right now is that one of the things that's most profound about mindfulness is that you begin to realize that all those narratives where you're the center of your own movie or the center of, your own narrative are really a fiction. And that who you really are is far, far more profound, deeper, more beautiful, and more creative than whatever narratives you tell yourself, whether those narratives are basically very critical of yourself or whether they're inflationary about, yourself and your ego. So what we're cultivating is a certain kind of clarity and balance of mind that's always available. But when we get lost in thought and we get caught up in the turmoil of roiled up in emotions, then we lose that clarity and we lose that groundedness. And then, in some sense, we lose our anchor to awareness, to mindfulness. And the way I'm using the word mindfulness, it's synonymous with awareness, pure awareness. And my working definition of mindfulness is the awareness that arises from paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. And it sounds really easy. Turns out it's only the hardest work in the world for us humans to string even 2 moments of mindfulness together and to be embodied rather than kind of from here up, just lost in thought in our heads. So I think for now, I will stop, and Tami and I will transition to maybe either having a conversation. If anything I've said, Tami, since you're sitting in for 3,500 people or whatever it is, if you have any questions or clarifications or want to play a particular kind of role as all students or the every person student, you're welcome certainly to do that. And then we can dive into these questions, which the ones that I've seen so far that have been offered up are really profound, and each one of which could, we could talk about for quite some time.
I think, Jon, I'll start with a question that really touched me from a woman named Anja, who wrote in, I've often heard in connection with meditation and mindfulness that I should not strive to become whole because I already am whole. But I just got diagnosed with Parkinson's and I feel anything but whole. My brain's falling apart and I notice it every day. How do I get to the place, the state, where I am whole? And more importantly, how do I understand the statement about being whole when my doctor says I'm broken?
Yeah, I saw your question earlier, and I'm really glad, Tami, that you're bringing that up first, because at the beginning, I'm wondering whether it's actually true that your doctor said you were broken. If so, that was a big mistake on your doctor's part, because you are not broken. And no doctor should ever tell the patient that they're broken. Their leg might be broken, their back might be broken, but they, as a human being, are not broken. And although, there are many things in medicine, many disorders in medicine or diseases in medicine for which we have no cures. In fact, there are almost no cures in medicine. And the few that there are, thank goodness for them. But that doesn't mean that there can't be healing. And healing involves coming to terms, at least in my vocabulary, coming to terms with things as they are. So you may think you're broken, but that doesn't mean you're broken. And it doesn't mean you don't have Parkinson's either. But then the question is, how can I be in wise relationship with what's happening to me? And that would include losing touch. You say your mind is kind of changing. Well, welcome to the club. It can happen at various speeds depending on your age and various kinds of diagnoses that might come about. But that doesn't mean that you're broken. It simply means that we need to take hold of the actuality of things. Parkinson's expresses itself in a lot of different ways, and it has a very, very variable trajectory from, sort of almost not noticing it at all to being relatively incapacitated by it. But if you start out thinking that you're broken, then no amount of meditating is going to fix you, because meditation is not about fixing. And medicine is not about fixing either. As I said, there are very few cures or fixes in medicine, but it's a big mistake to think you're broken just because you have a diagnosis like this. And I'm not belittling the fact that it could be totally overwhelming and completely transform everything that you think about your life and your future and your family and your body and everything else. That's part of the human condition, is that, there's not a single person on the planet that is going to escape this life alive. So how we go out and the kinds of disorders and diseases that we experience over time, look around you and you're going to find people who have diagnoses that you would not want to have. And I have a number of friends who have Parkinson's. Of course, nobody would want to have it. But there are a lot of people who have, a far more challenging diagnoses than that. And so there's a way of kind of approaching what your condition or your situation is, where you actually play with or explore or experiment with putting out the welcome mat for the fact that, as far as you know, especially if you've gotten multiple, opinions about it, because often with a diagnosis you want, to confirm a diagnosis with another, specialist, that the challenge is, okay, how am I going to be in wise relationship with this, with what's going on in my body, with what's going on in my mind, and of course, with what's going on in my life. And so this becomes the meditation practice. And it's not about fixing or curing or making it be some other way, but actually, as hard as this may and crazy as this may sound, to actually sooner or later come to terms with the fact that that diagnosis is the diagnosis, and in some sense putting out the welcome mat for it and seeing, okay, my life is completely changed perhaps, or I can't do things I used to do before because of tremors or whatever it is, and then find ways, as your own sort of scientist, so to speak, adventure in this whole domain of how to maintain what's deepest and best and most beautiful in yourself, even with such a diagnosis. And that would be true not just for Parkinson's, but, we see people all the time with terrible chronic pain conditions that do not respond to surgeries, multiple surgeries often, that do not respond to narcotics, which also have their own problems, heart disease, cancer of all different kinds, chronic conditions of all different kinds. And the challenge is always the same. How can I be in wise relationship to it by recognizing the opportunity to live my way into the challenges of this moment with integrity? And if I knew something more powerful than mindfulness to actually do that, and there's a huge amount of scientific evidence now supporting that people with all sorts of chronic illnesses actually, in terms of their well-being and overall health and their mental health, do extremely well by making mindfulness a core element of how they're going to move through their day and their lives. There's a lot of supporting scientific evidence for this, and that it also reduces symptoms and gives us new ways of being in relationship to old problems. That this then becomes, in some sense, the curriculum for, as I said during the guided meditation, for living your life as if it really, really mattered, and not surrendering to the narrative of how it's all over because this happened to me. You're much bigger than that me, even though it's hard to say and it's hard to actually come to terms with. But that's really the challenge. And why not see it as a love affair with things as they are while you still have the chance? After all, you are still breathing. And there is, I'm sure, more right with you than wrong with you, no matter what you think is wrong with you. And this is a kind of a dignified path to living your way into the full dimensionality of who you are, no matter what you're carrying, which is the root meaning, by the way, from the Latin of the word suffer. The word to suffer means to carry. And so you're carrying at this particular moment, this particular diagnosis or prognosis or burden, but you're also a miraculous being, if you will. So there's a lot more here than meets the eye. And the question is, can you recruit it all? And most of it comes through continuing to keep up your meditation practice and then letting all of your life, including your body and what it's experiencing with the Parkinson's, can do.
Thank you, Jon. There were several questions that related to thoughts and how we relate to thoughts in our mindfulness meditation practice. So I'm going to ask a couple of those questions. Kim asks, how can I discern deep insight from just more thinking?
Yeah. Well, let me start with this question then. You know, in many ways, it's an interesting question because you're asking, how can I discern the difference between deep insight and just thinking? But the I is also a thought. And I just want to throw that out there for you, Kim, that even those personal pronouns are really so much more thought-based than they are experience-based. So one of the things that goes on with the meditation practice is that we're actually cultivating intimacy with who we really are underneath those personal pronouns. And so in terms of thinking, this is the distinction between awareness and thinking. We are fantastic thinkers, and almost everything that arises when you're practicing meditation is a thought. The thoughts are just like, they're like the plague. They never stop and they're constant. You don't have to generate insights. When you get out of your own way, and that's why I'm bringing up the personal pronouns, when you let awareness itself do the meditation practice, and you don't create so much of a narrative that I'm meditating, then there's a much greater opportunity that, thinking will be going on. But insight is not something that you have to generate. It is what arises unpredictably when you're just okay with things as they are. And it comes out of the silence. It comes out of stillness. It comes out of awareness. And it comes unbidden. So the one thing you don't want to do, although mindfulness is often spoken of as insight meditation or vipassana, is to try to generate insights, because it will all just be thought-based. And the more you drive the thinking, the less these shy other forms of intelligence and possibility will arise, because there's too much kind of undergrowth of, thought vegetation, so to speak. So it's a wonderful question. And the most important thing is to not be attached to anything, either insights or thoughts or great thoughts, and just rest in awareness, as I said during the guided meditation. And insights and everything else will, in some sense, take care of itself over time. And you don't want to push this river. You just want to listen deeply to the unfolding of your own life from moment to moment to moment.
And then, Jon, here's a question we received right before we went on live with this broadcast. Someone wrote in theory, I understand that thoughts are just things, that they're not real. However, in practice, I don't have a concrete, visceral sense of what that really means. My thoughts feel very real. Can you unpack this concept for us?
Well, thoughts are like events in the field of awareness. And if you try to pursue them, they're like bubbles in a stream. They come, they go. They can have any content whatsoever. We have very little control over them. Even when you sit down to think about something, think back to when you were a student, if ever you were a student. very hard to concentrate the mind enough to even get 2 or 3 or 4 thoughts organized together in sequence so that they bring you to some kind of understanding. So these thoughts are kind of like waves in the mind, and they're driven by emotions, by turbulence, their randomness. Nobody knows what they are, by the way. Neuroscientists have no idea what a thought is. And they're like these tiny little nothings that actually drive us insane or can bring Nobel Prize-winning insights. And nobody knows what they are, but they really are a beautiful part of being human. And what's most important is that we learn to befriend our capacity for thinking and not be imprisoned by that very same capacity for thinking. So that's where the meditation practice comes in. You can, sometimes people will imagine that they're sitting by a river or a brook, and they're just hearing the gurgling of the brook, which is the thinking mind, the thought stream. And you're just sitting there and you let it come and let it go. Read Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. And there's a whole chapter in there about sitting by the river and what he hears sitting by the river. It's extremely profound. So I wouldn't be too worried about thinking. The most important thing, and I think I said this earlier, is to not take personally things that aren't personal. And we personalize almost everything in the field of both thoughts and emotions. We freight our thoughts with emotions around how much it's in my favor or against me, how much it's what I want or what I most want to run away from. And that's where we get imprisoned. That is where we get imprisoned. And you don't need to get out of prison. All you need to do is be aware of how easy it is to fall into the prison, and you're already free. So it's something where, yeah, you're going to be thinking the rest of your life, and it's a beautiful, beautiful capacity that we have. And God, it's horrible speaking about aging and loss and so forth. As you know, I mean, even thinking is not something, clear thinking is not something that you can count on for your entire life, or maybe ever in your life. And so we need to really appreciate the beauty of thought, and then the beauty of awareness that can hold any and every thought, because awareness is simply bigger than thought. And then you're free already. And then you can use thought and emotion to whatever degree you care to very, very good benefit, both for yourself and I must say also for others, because we're not isolated in the world. So when we practice mindfulness, we're actually practicing it for the benefit of others far and wide, not just our immediate family or colleagues, in ways that are hard to wrap your mind around at first, especially with thought, but will also become clearer to you the more you practice for, the first, 3 or 4 decades, let's say.